If you've ever been left behind, not by accident, but by someone who once swore they'd never walk away. I'm Sadie, 36 years old, a former interior designer from San Francisco, a wife, the one who kept things running, bank accounts, vet appointments, even Cody's vaccination schedule. My husband Evan thought it would be funny to teach me a lesson. During a road trip with his close kit group of buddies, after an argument he drove off, left me standing alone on a remote highway in a tiny town in New Mexico whose name I still can't pronounce. If you've ever had to choose between enduring and letting go, leave a comment, hit like, and follow this channel. Maybe my story will remind you, not everyone is worth the wait. I stood frozen in front of the gas station, still holding half a burrito. The early summer desert sun was harsh, wind kicking up red dust, and Evan's SUV was disappearing around the bend, its tires kicking white sand into the air. Kyle's voice, one of Evan's ride-or-die friends, echoed in my head. She's always got to have the last word, huh? They all laughed like they were at a bar, not in front of the woman who'd just been dumped on the roadside. I walked back inside, asked the cashier, a young woman in a baggy t-shirt and a nose ring, if there was any northbound bus. Maybe tomorrow, she said, glancing at me before looking back down at her phone. I unzipped my bag, pulled out my wallet. $32 in cash, credit cards. Still in Evan's wallet. He'd offered to carry them earlier because I always forgot stuff. My phone had battery, but when I called Evan, it went straight to blocked. I tried Kyle, then Marcus, no answer. I stepped outside slowly, sat on a faded blue plastic chair next to an old vending machine. My knees trembled. The only thing looping through my head? Evan didn't leave me because he was mad. He left because he meant to. I looked toward the pale orange hills in the distance. Nothing but road, dust, and sharp, stiff cactus. I found a room above a closed auto shop at the end of the street. The room smelled like stale air and nail polish remover. No AC. Just a ceiling fan spinning slowly and whining. I sat on the edge of the bed, sweat clinging to my back, eyes locked on my phone screen. Evan, I'm serious, call me back, this isn't funny. Sent. Delivered. No read receipt. I replayed lunch from a few hours earlier, when I asked Evan to stop drinking. It was hot and he was driving. He sneered, always telling me what to do. I'm just worried, I said quietly. Yeah? Then stay out of the car, walk it off. So I did. Thought he'd follow after cooling down, but they piled into the car, slammed the doors, and took off. I stood there, frying in the heat. I kicked off my thin sneakers, splashed my face with sink water stained yellow, and sat on the cold tile floor. I didn't cry, but something inside me cracked. A slow, thin fracture. I didn't know what I'd do tomorrow. But I knew, no matter how many times I called, Evan wasn't coming back. And I didn't realize that was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke at 6:30 to the sound of a truck horn on the main road. My head ached like I'd slept in a helmet. My eyes were swollen, even though I hadn't cried. Maybe it was the fan. Or the bleach-smelling pillow. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts, still nothing. I opened my Maps app. Location: Gallup, New Mexico. Population around 20,000. I zoomed in on bus stops. Only one bus out of town per day. The next one? 7:18 p.m. Destination? Albuquerque. I opened my wallet again. $32. A few coins in my jacket. Just enough for one meal. I put on my shoes. Socks had holes at the heel. And walked downstairs. The lobby was empty. The door hung ajar, sunlight slicing through the floating dust. There was a small convenience store nearby. I bought a cheese sandwich and a bottle of water, ate it on a stone bench out front. An older man in a denim shirt and cowboy hat smoked near a barbecue truck, glanced at me a few times but said nothing. I didn't blame him. I wouldn't know what to say either. That afternoon I wandered Main Street, a used bookstore, a shuttered barber shop, a red brick church. No tourists, no familiar faces. No. Evan. That evening, I returned to my room, dropped onto the bed and listened to the fan grind in rhythm. I tried calling Evan again. Still blocked. I left a voicemail. This isn't funny anymore. I really don't know what I'm doing. I didn't know why I was still hoping, maybe because after 10 years together, Evan had always driven, I was the one in the passenger seat, holding the map, packing the snacks. He picked the route. But now he'd driven off. And I had no map. On the second day, I ate a pack of crackers and drank water from the sink. I went to the local library, found an outlet and shade. I checked my bank app. Empty. My supplemental card had been disconnected. No transactions after yesterday. I tried calling Kyle, then Marcus, then Tyler. All went to voicemail or rang out. I leaned against the wall. My phone slipped from my hand to the floor. That night, I showered with hotel soap, washed my hair in an old tub with spotty hot water. In the mirror, I barely recognized the face staring back. Pale skin, tired eyes. But the thing that hit hardest was the bare spot on my ring finger. The wedding ring was gone. When had I taken it off? I placed the phone on the side table, turned on airplane mode and shut off the light. But in my mind, the same thought kept pushing to the surface. Maybe he really doesn't plan to come back. And on that third night, I had to decide. Sit here and wait? Or stand up and leave? On the fourth morning, I sat in a small bakery on the main avenue, cradling a bland coffee, resting against my torn backpack. Outside, gray skies hung low. A man was covering his watermelon cart with a tarp. I glanced at the digital board at the bus depot through the foggy window. The bus to Albuquerque left at 5:18 p.m. I'd used my last money to buy the ticket yesterday, printed the receipt at the library, folded it neatly into my coat pocket. I didn't know where I'd go next. I just knew I had to leave this town. Inside the bakery, it smelled like scorched sugar and vanilla. The short-haired girl behind the counter, wearing a peach-patterned apron, handed me a cookie bag with a small smile. "I've seen you around the past few days," she said gently. "Safe travels." I nodded, didn't say anything, swallowed the lump rising in my throat. At 3 p.m., I returned to the motel, packed my charger, wet socks, a toothbrush with a cracked handle. I stuffed everything into my backpack, locked the room, and left the key on the desk. The manager didn't ask questions. I walked out feeling lighter than I expected. The bus stop was 4 blocks away. I walked slowly, backpack dragging down one shoulder. When I arrived, I sat on a dented aluminum bench next to an old man reading a newspaper. The digital clock blinked slowly. Eventually, a silver bus pulled in at exactly 5 o'clock. I handed my ticket to the driver, boarded, picked a window seat, and stayed silent. As the bus pulled away, I didn't look back. Albuquerque gleamed under neon gas signs. I got off just before midnight, shoulders sore from the long ride. The terminal hummed with air conditioning. A few people slept, curled up on benches, arms around luggage. I bought a bottle of water from a vending machine, sat in a corner of the waiting room, pulled out my phone. The signal was weak, but I opened the map. I couldn't afford a flight. Couldn't afford to stay, either. A middle-aged woman walked past with a rolling suitcase. For a second, I thought it was my mom, her gait, her hair. But then she disappeared through the revolving door and the feeling left with her. I opened my contacts, scrolled to the bottom. Dad. Florida. I hovered over his name. One call and I could go back. One call and things might get easier. But it would also mean explaining everything. Hearing all the things I knew he'd wanted to say for years. I put the phone away, pulled out the wedding ring still buried at the bottom of my bag. Held it between my fingers, spun it under the overhead light. The metal had dulled. The stone had lost its sparkle. I closed my hand around it, then stood up. Outside, the rain had started again, light but steady. I pulled my coat tighter, hoisted the backpack, and walked toward the old part of town. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I wasn't calling home. And what I didn't know then was that walk would lead me to a place that didn't exist on any map. I collapsed by the dirt road after walking for over 2 hours from downtown Albuquerque. It was well past midnight. The rain had stopped, but the wind still crept through my damp collar, numbing each joint in my fingers. My feet were numb inside filthy shoes. I sat where a narrow trail cut between 2 rows of weathered wooden fences. On the other side was a cornfield, still partially unharvested. I pulled out the last granola bar from my bag, chewing slowly like I could stretch the final bit of energy. A dull headache was creeping up the back of my neck. "I just need somewhere to sleep," I whispered, not sure if it was to myself or the dark sky overhead. Headlights from a pickup truck suddenly swept across the road. I squinted, stood, and raised a hand slowly. The truck slowed, then stopped a few yards away. A small woman stepped out, silver hair tied high, flashlight in hand. She said something, but I couldn't make it out. "I don't have anything," I said quickly, breath shaky. "I'm not asking for money, just, I don't know where I'm going." She looked at me for a long moment, the beam shining into my face. Then, slowly lowering, "Your name?" she asked, her voice slightly raspy. "Sadie." She nodded and turned. "Get in, this wind cuts like knives." I sat in the passenger seat, clutching my backpack. The truck rolled slowly down the narrow path, flanked by tall plume grass. A soft yellow light glowed from a wooden house in the distance. She introduced herself as Martha. "You look worn out," she said as we pulled into the yard. "I won't ask much, unless you want to talk." I just nodded. My throat felt like it was wrapped in burlap. Inside it smelled of damp wood, flour, and something like peppermint oil. Family photos filled the walls, but all were old, the edges yellowing. None were recent. Martha poured me a glass of water and pointed to a small room by the kitchen. "Clean bed, fresh towels. We'll talk in the morning, if you're up for it." I didn't respond, only nodded low. When I stepped inside, there was a metal-framed bed, a cotton quilt, a flat pillow, but everything smelled of soap. I sat down, took off my shoes and jacket, then lay sideways, eyes fixed on the wooden ceiling. Each knot in the wood felt like it was boring into my chest. A strange feeling. I was in a place where no one knew who I was, and no one needed an explanation. I drifted off to the ticking of a clock in the kitchen, peppermint still faint in the air, light enough to feel like memory. The next morning I woke to the sound of a spoon tapping against a ceramic mug. Martha was pouring coffee into 2 cups. She didn't say anything, just pushed one toward me and sat down, slowly eating toast with peanut butter. I sat across from her, holding the mug in both hands. We didn't speak until she set down her spoon and said gently, "If you need a place for a few days, I've got one. Not much, but it's enough." I looked at her. Her eyes didn't search for where I came from or why I looked like I'd fallen apart. There was only one thing clear in her gaze. She had no one else in that house. And for now, she wasn't sending me away. I gripped the handle of the mug and nodded. I didn't know why, but that morning, I started thinking about staying. Not forever, just a few days. Maybe a few days would be enough to start something new. Luke nodded like he already knew. Fair enough. We all have things we choose to forget. If you've ever gone quiet because no one believed you, or been blamed just for telling the truth. I get it. Some days, you don't need advice or comfort, you just need someone to stand next to you and paint a wall in silence. Leave a comment if you've ever carried the weight of something that wasn't your fault. Share this story if you believe someone out there needs to hear what you were once denied. You're not crazy. You're not wrong. You're just stronger than they were ready for. That night, Martha served cornbread, drizzled each slice with honey. Luke stayed for dinner. I watched them laugh, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged in the picture. No explanations needed. After dishes, Marta put her hand on my shoulder. "Tomorrow, if you're free, I'll show you how to make apple preserves. The folks at the village fair will love it." I looked at her, at the tray of bright red jam, and nodded. Later, Luke and I sat out on the back porch with mugs of tea. He didn't say much, just listened. No advice, no fixing. And sometimes, that's all it takes. I didn't know what would change the next day, but that evening, I laughed. Not politely, not out of obligation, just because I felt lighter. And that same night, a message from the past suddenly lit up my screen. Like it knew I was just steady enough to read it. It was from an old number. Lena, a former colleague from the design firm. The message was short. Heard you went missing, is it true? If this number still works, let me know you're okay. I read it 3 times, then set my phone on the wooden table. Martha was peeling apples, each slice dropping neatly into a ceramic bowl. Everything okay? She asked, not looking up. A message from someone I used to know. Not Evan, someone who knew me before everything. I paused. Before I disappeared? Martha only nodded, like she'd heard this before from more people than I'd guessed. After breakfast, I headed to the back shed where we kept tools. Since Luke suggested we open a small jam and produce stall at the fair later this month, something in me had quietly shifted. I brought out the empty glass jars, wiped the lids, checked the seals. Martha was cooking a fresh batch. Warm cinnamon and ginger filling the room. What's the stand gonna be called? I asked. You decide, she said, pouring jam into a jar. You made the first batch, you name it. I smiled, flipping over the sticky note. Batch 3. Sadie's Mix. I couldn't remember the exact blend I used, but I remembered dipping my spoon in, tweaking the sugar, adjusting every step. Luke came by that afternoon, carrying a pre-cut wooden sign. Kind Root Kitchen was softly carved in the middle, outlined in white paint. I looked at the sign, then at him, surprised. You said it during lunch last week, remember? I shook my head. About how this place felt kind, down to its roots. I pressed my fingers to the edge of the board. Yeah, sounds better than most things I've ever called a job. That week passed in a blur of labeling jars, filling baskets, checking seals, scribbling prices. I made a little spreadsheet on my phone, tracking ingredient costs, test sales to neighbors. Martha didn't ask for it, but I needed to. It felt like a part of me was coming back, only this time, it didn't need Evan's approval. Friday night, after we finalized our first batch, I reopened my email. A small tab popped up in the corner. Unread messages. 248. I scrolled, skipped Evan, skipped the banks. Stopped at one from Ms. Conway, my old department lead. Subject line, remote freelance. Are you available? I didn't reply right away, but I starred it. And for the first time in months, the idea of working again didn't make me feel sick. That evening, I sat on the porch, notebook in hand. Luke was a few steps down, whittling a piece of wood. He didn't say anything when I joined him, just handed me a pen he found in the yard, still working. What are you writing? Jam flavors, I said, and ideas. Later might turn into something better than handwritten tags. First time you're glad for a typo. I raised an eyebrow. Kind Root, that was a typo, right? I laughed. Maybe, but it's also the truest name I've ever used. I didn't know where this would go, but right now, I knew I'd just laid the first stone of something that felt like mine. And then, just a day later, another email arrived, from someone I never thought I'd hear from again. It was from Gabrielle Davis. No subject line, just a single sentence preview. I know where you are. I stared at the phone on the kitchen table. It was just past dusk. Martha was baking apple pie. Luke was patching the leaky porch roof from last night's rain. I didn't open it right away. I got up, poured some water, came back. My hand touched the phone, but didn't unlock it. Part of me wanted to pretend it hadn't come. But I knew Gabriel. Once he found someone, he didn't go away quietly. I opened it. Sadie? It took time and a few calls, but I finally found you. We both know this can't go on forever. You've made your point. I'm flying in Thursday. We'll talk. Be ready to come home. No questions, no apology, just a smooth command. like every plan he'd ever forced before. I turned off the screen, pushed the phone aside, and sat still. My heart wasn't racing. My hands didn't shake, just that cold calm inside, like stepping into snow. And knowing you're never going back in. That night, as I packed the pies into jars, Martha glanced at me, still tying ribbons onto lids. News from the past? She asked. He found me, I said. He's coming Thursday. She didn't pause, just nodded lightly. Then you've got 3 days. Decide what's still yours and what's not. The next morning, I biked into town. Ben Whitaker's law office sat on Main Street under a weathered wooden sign. Ben was maybe 10 years older than me, once worked in Austin before taking over his father's firm. When I told him what I needed, he didn't flinch. You'd like to file for divorce? I nodded. And terminate joint control of the bank account? You have a copy of the marriage certificate? I do, and a passport copy if you need it. He studied me for a moment, then gave a small smile. You've come further than most I've seen in your shoes. I didn't answer. I just thanked him, signed the forms, and walked out, head high. That evening, I emailed Lena. I'm okay, somewhere new. If the freelance job's still open, I'd like to try again. Then I messaged Evan. Not to beg or warn, just a short line. Thursday, you don't need to come. I'm not at the old place, and I'm not the old me. Late that night, Luke knocked gently on the kitchen frame. I heard from Martha, he said. If you want me there, when he comes. I looked at him. I don't think he's the type to make a scene, but thank you. He nodded, stepped back, then paused. Still, sometimes, it's enough just to have someone standing beside you. I didn't reply, but I knew that if Gabriel showed up, I wouldn't be standing alone. And when Thursday came, I was ready for something I once thought I couldn't face. Gabriel arrived right at noon. I was in the shed checking jam labels for the fair shipment when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, a sound out of place in a world of wind and clucking hens. I glanced through the small window, a silver SUV, polished like it had just rolled out of a showroom. I didn't rush out. I washed my hands, dried them with an old rag, removed my apron, and folded it neatly. When I stepped onto the porch, he was standing in the middle of the yard, hands in his pockets, sunglasses pushed up on his head, looking like he was waiting for service at a resort. Not standing on a farm surrounded by apple trees and carrots. Sadie, he began, that familiar deep voice. You really living here? Better than dying slowly in a nice house, I said, keeping a few steps between us. Why are you here? He took off his sunglasses, softened his tone. To bring you back. This isn't you. You're the planner, the one who matches paint chips and fabric swatches, not apple jam. I let out a small laugh. You're wrong. That was me, when I was with you. It's different now. Gabriel stepped closer, his expression shifting to confusion. I know I messed up, leaving you in New Mexico. It was stupid. I was drunk. You plan to be drunk? I cut in. You and your buddies sat down and decided when to ditch me, when the laughs would be the loudest? He fell silent. His eyes darted around. Look, your parents called me. They're worried. Friends asked too. Even the company. You know, people thought you were kidnapped. Well then, they should know something important, I replied, pulling an envelope from my pocket. This is the divorce paperwork. Signed. Includes asset division. My lawyer will reach out if you need help. Gabriel didn't take it right away. He stared at the envelope like it was a dagger. You're not serious. I've never been clearer, I said, holding it out. Take it. And leave. You'll regret this, he growled. Staying here with jam and dirt, when everything we built is still... We didn't build anything, Gabe. You built your empire. I was just the patchwork, decorating the living room, smiling at the right times, staying quiet in the car. I stepped forward and placed the envelope in his hand. I've left that role behind. Martha stood on the porch saying nothing. Luke was there too, one hand resting on a shovel handle. No threat, just presence. Gabriel looked around again. No one pushed him, no one threatened him, but the whole place spoke the same truth. He no longer belonged here. He turned, walked back to the SUV in silence. The car door slammed harder than it needed to, then the engine roared and faded beyond the apple trees. I stood there a few more seconds. No trembling, no shallow breaths. Just lightness. Martha walked over, didn't ask anything, she simply said, "There's a batch that needs sealing." I nodded and returned to the shed. That afternoon I started thinking about renaming the label. This time it would have my name on it. I renamed it Sadie's Small Batch. Not because the new jam tasted better. Not because anyone suggested it. I just felt it was time to print my name on something. Not for others to recognize, but for me to remember. I'm here. I'm doing this. With my own 2 hands. Martha didn't say anything when she saw me cutting each label, sticking them evenly on every jar. She just set down a spool of twine on the table, then headed back to the kitchen. In the golden light of late afternoon, the glass jars lined up on the wooden shelf, glowing like they knew they were about to be chosen. Luke brought over a folding wood table with a sturdy metal frame. He helped me set it up in the weekend market stall. We covered it with a cream linen cloth, arranged the jam by flavor: apple, cinnamon, strawberry, lemon, peach, basil. I added a small hand-lettered sign. "We don't sell happiness, but we do sell jam." People stayed longer than I expected. An older lady asked for a sample and bought 2 jars. A dad and his daughter laughed when I shared a peach jam cookie story. A couple asked if we sold online. Yes, I'm building the website myself, using the exact template I once pitched to clients at my old firm. Only this time, no one's tweaking it for branding. The branding is me. That night, I emailed Lena. "I'll take the freelance job, but only 20 hours a week. The rest, I'll be busy growing apples and making jam." She replied almost instantly. "Didn't think you'd choose a life like this, but you seem more at peace than ever." I looked at her message, then up. Luke was rearranging the egg basket on the porch. Martha was stitching the frayed hem of an old apron. I wasn't fully at peace, but I was steady. And in this slower rhythm, I wasn't running from anyone anymore. Not even myself. A week later, I received the official certificate from the court. The divorce was finalized. I filed it into the document box, right next to the tax ID form for my new sole proprietorship. Both carried the name Sadie Elaine Rhodes. I trimmed a few dried lavender stems, wrapped them in brown cloth and placed them by the fireplace. Martha passed by, sniffed them gently, then asked, "Where should this go?" "The future," I said, tying the knot. "I don't know where you're listening from. In the car, before bed, or on a day you need something to remind you not to give up. But if you've ever been left behind, overlooked, or had to start over with nothing but your bare hands, I hope you know this. You weren't wrong. You were just finally going the right way, your way." Leave a comment if you've ever chosen yourself again, even just a little bit each day. Share this story if you believe someone out there needs a quiet reminder. Starting over isn't failure. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to follow the channel, because the next story might be exactly what you or someone else needs to hear, right now. Sadie's story isn't just about walking away from a toxic husband. It's about quietly reclaiming the right to define herself. From a controlled wife to the owner of her own life, work, and name. In real life, many women are standing at the same fork in the road. Stay for what's familiar, or step out into the unknown. Sadie reminds us, freedom doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being brave. One small step at a time.